This is my VHS copy of Godzilla 1998. Judging by just how it looks, you might notice that the case is gone. It was destroyed over the years, and this thing is very worn out. It's this VHS right here that is largely responsible for me being a Godzilla fan. And honestly, I think without this VHS right here, this channel would not have been made. I remember when I was very young, maybe 3 or 4 years old, and I was going through our VHS drawer and looked for something new to watch. I stumbled upon it, and my dad told me that I would probably be terrified by this movie, but after I insisted, he put it on for me, and well, the rest is history. I've had sort of a weird history with this movie. When I first watched it when I was little, I was captivated by it. But as time went on, I started to hate it and eventually loathe the film. Why? Well, a lot of this has to do with the fact that as I got deeper into the Godzilla franchise, I found more interesting and entertaining films to watch. I realized the 98 film fundamentally misunderstood the character and was a poor adaptation that failed to live up to the cultural icon that is Godzilla. If you were one of the 266 people subscribed to this channel on January 4th, 2022, then you probably saw my Godzilla tier list video. In that video, I absolutely rip into the 1998 American Godzilla film. No one likes Godzilla 1998. I'm sorry, no one likes this movie. If you say you do, you're lying to yourself. This movie is horrible. It is peak Roland Emmerich being a terrible filmmaker. I don't want to get into this any more than I have to, but this very much just seems like Roland Emmerich hating Godzilla, not wanting to make a Godzilla movie, and just wanting to do his own thing while using the Godzilla brand. He blatantly rips off Jurassic Park throughout most of the movie, throughout like that third act with all the baby Zillas, and it just makes me angry thinking about it. You might notice how out of character this seems for me, and you would be correct. At that point in time, I was still learning how to critique a film and explain why I did or did not like it. So I resorted to using vague, hyperbolic language to get my point across. My opinion of this movie has remained the same over the years until a few weeks ago. I was bored and scrolling through HBO Max. I wasn't sure what I wanted to watch, but eventually I stumbled upon the 98 Godzilla movie. After thinking it over, I decided to give the film another watch. I was fully expecting to just laugh at it and turn it off after a few minutes, but the opposite happened. As the movie started, the memories of being a little kid and watching this movie, it slowly came rushing back. I started to remember why I loved this movie so much. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Godzilla 1998 has one of the best first acts in blockbuster history.
What?
No, all right. I know that sounds bad.
Now, okay. Hear me out for a second. I could see you all unsubscribing and disliking. Just please give me a second. Hear me out, please. I'm being 100% serious. The film starts out with this yellow, grainy footage of French Polynesia as this old-timey patriotic music plays over the film's score by composer David Arnold. We then see footage of iguanas as the foreboding music continues to build. It's clear that something horrible is about to happen as the palm trees are wiped out and men in hazmat suits are shown. A man speaking French can be heard speaking over an intercom as we are shown iguana eggs. Finally, we see a plane flying overhead as a nuclear explosion goes off as the iguanas look on. It's one of the best opening title sequences of all time. It's equally as ominous as it is suspenseful. On top of that, it perfectly encapsulates the character of Godzilla being a metaphor for nuclear weapons. You don't need to waste time giving exposition, you just kind of see it, and it works perfectly. I wholeheartedly believe that you could put this at the start of Godzilla 2014, and it would work seamlessly. And that's because the filmmakers behind that movie literally did that. Yeah, it's kind of weird looking back on it now because they are really similar. Both are of the same quality in my opinion, but it's clear that the team behind the 2014 movie just went, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, I'm not saying they ripped them off. Utilizing old stock footage of nuclear testing is nothing new in monster movies. Even Toho did that back in 1955 with Godzilla Raids Again. It works as a means of easily explaining where the monster came from without needing a ton of exposition. The very last shot of the opening title sequence is a lone irradiated iguana egg. It cracks open in sync with a lightning strike that transitions us to the cold open where a giant mysterious creature destroys a Japanese cannery ship, leaving only one survivor. The film then introduces us to our protagonist, Nick Tatopoulos, played by Matthew Broderick. He's a scientist working for the US government in Chernobyl, examining the effects of radiation on wildlife, specifically worms. However, he is interrupted by a US State Department helicopter arriving, and he's informed that he's being reassigned to Panama. There, we get a really neat scene where Nick complains to Colonel Hicks that he studies worm samples, and he isn't exactly sure why he's been reassigned to Panama. He's not even sure why he's there or what the sample is.
I don't see it. Where is it? I don't see it.
This is a wildly creative shot. It's always stuck with me, and it does such a great job of showcasing the size and scale of this creature that we haven't really seen yet. As of right now, the mystery and suspense is building perfectly. Is it a little cliche? Sure. I know that Roland Emmerich gets dragged a lot for having a million different location changes in his first acts. He did it in Independence Day, he did it in The Day After Tomorrow, but I think for a film like Godzilla, it works really well. It's a great way of showing how a monster like this would affect the entire world, rather than just one country. Like, of course the United States would have their hands in every single nation trying to figure out what's going on, because, well, that's just what we do. Anyways, later on, we're introduced to more characters that will be relevant later on, and we are even shown New York City. Meanwhile, in Jamaica, Nick and his team examine another massive cannery ship that has likely been destroyed by this creature. The military believes that this is a giant dinosaur running amok, while Nick puts forth the theory that maybe this creature is an irradiated mutant of sorts. Again, the imagery and scale here is absolutely top-notch. The film is doing such a great job of making the audience just want to know what the monster looks like. The music also sells this mystery as well. At times it feels like a John Williams score. We see yet another fishing boat destroyed just off the eastern seaboard, hinting that this creature is getting closer and closer to America. The following morning, an old fisherman named Joe decides to try and catch some fish in the East River as some bums heckle him. In a sequence that was showcased heavily in the film's marketing, Joe thinks he caught a big fish, but quickly loses control of his fishing rod before seeing a massive creature coming towards him. It destroys the dock as Joe runs away from it and just barely survives with his life. In this specific sequence, the visual effects are top-notch. On top of that, the setup, the foreboding, dread of what's going to happen just drives the entire scene. I mean, you know he's not going to catch a fish, right? I think everyone kind of gets that. What makes this work so well is that it feels like a horror movie. You're almost waiting for Joe to get wiped out by this creature. And there's a reason this was featured so heavily in the marketing, because it's just awesome. This creature arrives in New York City and begins causing chaos and destroys boats, cars, and trucks. The filmmakers did a really good job of setting this up. I love the scene where all the New Yorkers feel the footsteps and look around confused before we get this incredible money shot of the creature making his way down the street. However, this is where the film really starts to go downhill, as the kaiju action is constantly being interrupted by characters doing dumb stuff that we, the audience, do not care about. For me, the movie stops being good when Hank Azaria's character is nearly stepped on by the monster. It's almost like an omen of things to come, where the film starts to prioritize gags over actual destruction, and a massive tonal shift happens. From this point onwards, Godzilla 98 becomes a confused mess, where it isn't sure if it wants to be a monster movie, or a comedy, or a Jurassic Park ripoff. We'll get more into these tonal problems later on in the video, but still, it's important to acknowledge how the first 30 minutes of this movie manages to be perfect.
Everything, down to the last minute details.
Like, it is intriguing, it is foreboding, it is suspenseful, and I don't feel like enough people talk about how good that first act really is. It's everything that a first act in a monster movie should be. Following this rampage, New York City undergoes evacuation procedures as advised by Nick, who suggests enticing the creature with a hefty pile of fish to reveal itself. However, the military's attempt to eliminate it backfires, causing more harm as the creature flees and the military accidentally blows up the Chrysler Building. Nick manages to get a blood sample, revealing through a makeshift pregnancy test that the creature reproduces asexually and is gathering sustenance for its offspring. During his endeavors, Nick encounters his ex-girlfriend, Audrey Timmons, an aspiring news reporter. Audrey stumbles upon classified information and footage in Nick's temporary military setup, unraveling the mystery of the monster's origins. She steals this because she has this aspiration of broadcasting this and making it her big break. But her boss, Charles Kamen, steals the tape and claims credit for the discovery, branding the creature as Godzilla. Exposed by the tape's release, Nick is sidelined from the operation and disavows Audrey. He is then whisked away by the enigmatic French Secret Service agent, I believe it's pronounced Roche. He's a really weird character, and I'll just kind of get that out of the way. This whole movie has like really bizarre, stereotypical characters that feel like they're ripped out of The Simpsons. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that like Nancy Cartwright is in this movie, who voices Bart Simpson. And Hank Azaria is in this movie, and he voices a ton of characters on The Simpsons. It's really weird how there's a bunch of, like, Simpsons voice actors in this movie. I know this was very likely intentional, because at that point in time, The Simpsons was, like, massive. But I don't know, it just feels very distracting. Anyways, Felipe, who's the French Secret Service guy, discloses their surveillance of the events to conceal France's involvement in being responsible for Godzilla's creation. Suspecting a nest within the city, they collaborate with Nick to locate and obliterate the nest. Godzilla then reemerges, leading to Nick and Felipe's team discovering a nest of over 200 eggs in Madison Square Garden. As the eggs hatch and the offspring attack, the film quickly turns into a Jurassic Park ripoff where the Godzilla offspring feel more like velociraptors than anything else. There are some really lame bits where Nick knocks over gumballs and makes the baby Godzillas like wipe out. It's like a Home Alone ripoff. It's just really weird, and like I said, it's a tonal mess. It's supposed to be scary, but it's like they tripped over gumballs, like, haha, comedy? Amidst the chaos, Audrey and Nick reconcile, only to face the wrath of the adult Godzilla, determined to avenge its children. A frantic chase ensues through Manhattan, culminating in Godzilla getting trapped in the Brooklyn Bridge, and then it's killed by the Air Force. Okay. With Godzilla vanquished, Audrey severs ties with Kamen and departs with Nick while Felipe retrieves incriminating evidence from Animal's tape before bidding farewell. Meanwhile, amidst the rubble, we see a lone egg and it like hatches and they're like, yeah, this is the dawn of a new chapter in the creature saga, but not really. I mean, there was Godzilla the series and that kicks ass, but beyond that, a proper sequel was never made. So what happened? How did we get here? I know this video is called In Defense of Godzilla 1998, and I get it feels weird that I'm like ripping on it this much, especially considering that, you know, that's the title. But first, I feel like it's important to figure out how the film got to this point and why it's like this. So let's get into the history of this American Godzilla. Wait, are you tired of feeling like your online privacy is as secure as a post-it note on a busy street? Picture this. Browsing the internet without protection is like traveling with a see-through backpack. Everyone can see where you keep your wallet. But fear not, because today's video is sponsored by Private Internet Access, your virtual bodyguard in the digital world. So, what exactly is a VPN? Well, it's a lot like a cloak of invisibility for your internet connection. With Private Internet Access, your IP address is hidden and your online activity is encrypted through a secure tunnel, shielding you from prying eyes and data thieves. Think about those public Wi-Fi networks at airports or coffee shops. They're a goldmine for hackers lurking in the shadows, ready to snatch your personal data quicker than you can say password 123. But with Private Internet Access, your data stays safe and sound, even on sketchy networks. Their world-class server infrastructure encrypts your connection, making your information as bulletproof as Godzilla. And Here's the kicker. Have you ever missed out on binge watching your favorite shows because of regional restrictions? With private internet access, you can wave goodbye to geo-blocks and say hello to unlimited content from around the globe. From streaming services to online deals, private internet access lets you access it all with just a click of a button. And with support for all major platforms, you can protect every device in your household or workspace. And did I forget to mention their commitment to privacy? With over 30 million downloads, private internet access is the most transparent VPN provider out there. They never log your data, and their no logs policy has stood the test of time. Plus, signing up for private internet access is risk-free with their 30-day money-back guarantee and 24/7 customer support at your fingertips. Speaking from personal experience, this is the best VPN that I've ever used. So why wait? Protect your digital life today with private internet access. You can use my referral code www.piavpn.com/firewood to get 83% off private internet access with 4 months free. You heard that right. 4 months free. Remember, when it comes to your privacy, don't leave it to chance. Choose private internet access. Despite coming out in 1998, we have to go all the way back to 1983 when Steve Miner pitched Godzilla King of the Monsters in 3D to Toho. Miner had previously directed Friday the 13th Part 2 and Part 3, while also working on films like The Last House on the Left and the first Friday the 13th movie. Toho approved the pitch, and thus work began on the very first American Godzilla. Miner hired Fred Decker to write the film's script. Weirdly enough, Decker wasn't actually a Godzilla fan. He described the Showa-era flicks as being cheesy. As a result, the script leaned away from special effects and destruction, instead taking more inspiration from the works of Steven Spielberg, with the goal being to make this action-adventure romp more than your run-of-the-mill kaiju flick. Miner then hired William Stout to design this new version of Godzilla, and if I'm being honest, I kind of dig it. While the head is way too big and too similar to that of a T-Rex, I think it works as a unique take on the character. In my opinion, the best Godzilla design is -1, but the second best design is the Heisei era Godzilla, and that was like a couple years away at this point, so I think it works. You see, the silhouette is there. Godzilla has to have a good silhouette. If you can just show someone this, they'll be like, oh yeah, that's Godzilla. The maple leaf spines are there, which is better than the 2014 design. The posture is perfect. Granted, it is hard to tell how this would have looked on screen, as our only point of reference are these promotional pictures with very basic and not so flattering lighting. Looking at the American merchandise and artwork of Godzilla, this is actually pretty close to how your average American in the 1980s would perceive the character. So, again, since this video is filled with controversial opinions, the dislike to like ratio is going to be crazy. I'm already calling it. I like this design.
Boo this man!
In order to bring Godzilla to life, the filmmakers considered various special effects methods. Miner reached out to prominent figures in the Hollywood special effects industry, inviting many to a special screening of the original 1954 film. Rick Baker was tasked with creating an animatronic Godzilla head for the close-up shots, while Jim Danforth was slated to animate stop motion with David Allen overseeing the animation team. Most importantly, though, Miner envisioned the film to be in 3D. Despite keen interest from producers like John Peters and Keith Barish, the projected budget of $30 million made studios kind of shy away from it. They deemed it excessive for what they perceived as a children's film. By the end of 1984, faced with studio reluctance and budget constraints, Miner abandoned efforts to move the film into production. Meanwhile, Toho had independently revived the franchise by making Return of Godzilla, marking the first Godzilla film in 9 years. Nearly a decade later, in 1992, Toho sold the rights to produce an American Godzilla film to Sony Pictures Entertainment. Screenwriters Terry Rossio and Ted Elliott were enlisted to craft a script for the film, completing it by 1994. The plot follows a hostile alien race capable of engineering a biological weapon intended to obliterate life on Earth, paving the way for alien colonization. This bioweapon, would be known as the Griffin, and it arrives at a lake in Utah encased within a meteorite. dispatching probe bats to gather genetic material from Earth's diverse fauna to create a monster. Enter Godzilla, a creature forged by an ancient civilization through blending dinosaur genes to combat this imminent threat. Godzilla embarks on a journey towards the lake to thwart the meteor and probe bats. However, Godzilla's mission is thwarted when Godzilla is tranquilized and captured at the Golden Gate Bridge by the US Navy. With Godzilla neutralized, the probe bats intensify their genetic harvesting, constructing the Griffin's monstrous body. Despite efforts by the human characters to intervene, they arrive too late as the Griffin emerges, fully formed, and it sets course for New York City. In the heart of New York, Godzilla regains consciousness and confronts the Griffin in a climactic showdown. Initially hindered by a lingering tranquilizer tank, Godzilla rallies, breaks free, and turns the tide of the battle. Ultimately, Godzilla emerges victorious, vanquishing the Griffin and safeguarding Earth from impending doom. Quick side note, apparently the movie was supposed to end with the Griffin being decapitated and the head would have been on the Statue of Liberty. Director Jan de Bont, fresh off the success of Speed, took interest in the script and Sony hired him. Stan Winston was then hired to bring Godzilla, the Griffin, and the probe bats to life through practical effects. Based on what has been released, either through leaks or just the Stan Winston Studios website, I absolutely love these monster designs. Godzilla looks great here. It feels like a big dinosaur, but it's an improved version over the William Stout version from 1983. I love how aggressive the face looks. It feels like it belongs in the Heisei Gamera trilogy just based on aesthetics alone. Even then, I'm not sure if this would have been the final design. There's this one promotional image where the design looks really similar to the main Heisei era Godzilla, but regardless, it's a really solid look. The Griffin looks fantastic too. It blends fantasy and sci-fi, with the monster obviously being a nod or a callback to the Griffin from mythology. However, it also has this otherworldly presence to it. I love the hooves and I love its posture. It feels like Toho could realistically make this a man in a suit if they really wanted to put the Griffin in one of their movies. I genuinely wish I could see this monster go toe-to-toe with Godzilla. Like, I just want to know how they would fight. There's a really awesome fan animation on YouTube by Lost Utopia Films where the Griffin fights the legendary Godzilla and the 1998 Godzilla. Getting back on topic, disagreements over the budget arose swiftly. Sony deemed the Rossio and Elliott script to be way too expensive. They estimated it at around $140 to $180 million. Even after revisions, that brought it down to $120 million. Director Jan de Bont thought that it could be done for $100 million, but failed to reach a consensus. He also felt that the studio was imposing its own ideas into the script, which, that has never happened with Sony. That's out of character for Sony. I don't think I've ever seen Sony meddle with their own movies. That never happens. Jan de Bont would exit the project on December 26th, 1994. As a result, the film entered a state of development hell. Despite efforts by various writers to trim the budget, several potential directors were deterred by its challenges. That was until Independence Day director Roland Emmerich took on the Herculean task of getting this film made. He threw out Rossio and Elliott's script and worked with Dean Devlin to create their own screenplay from scratch that featured Godzilla as the antagonist. Now look, this is where we get more to the, in defense of portion of the video. I think it's safe to say that Roland Emmerich's adaptation of Godzilla took a very stark departure from its Japanese origins. I know. What? This point has never been made before. The film transplanted the iconic monster from the nuclear landscapes of Japan to the bustling urban jungle of New York City. Instead of being used as a hulking analogy for nukes, Godzilla was turned into a giant iguana of sorts that could just run really fast. This radical reimagining of Godzilla's narrative, coupled with significant altercations to the creature's appearance and behavior, set the stage for the almost immediate fan backlash that followed. One of the primary sources of discontent stemmed from the film's deviation of the core themes and cultural significance of the Japanese series. Godzilla, once a symbol of nuclear devastation and humanity's folly, was transformed into a generic monster devoid of profound symbolism, and it just didn't feel like Godzilla. As many others would say, it took the god out of Godzilla. While the original Godzilla films often explored complex themes and social commentary, People had a problem with Emmerich's adaptation prioritizing action sequences and special effects, sacrificing depth and visual extravagance. To that I say, like, dude, have you ever seen, like, Godzilla vs. Megalon? Like, Godzilla can be goofy, Godzilla can be just a big dumb action movie. It's like... This shift in focus alienated not only purist fans, but also general audiences seeking a more serious narrative. Moreover, the redesign of Godzilla was met with a lot of scorn. So let's get into the design now. Emmerich's original intentions with this design was to make Godzilla more of an agile character. That way there could be chase scenes in the movie. Again, like, look, the like to dislike ratio, there's like probably 2 likes and like a quadrillion dislikes, but hear me out. I don't have a problem with Godzilla running. I have no problem with there being chase scenes in a Godzilla movie. I can understand why Roland Emmerich didn't want a bunch of characters standing on a rooftop or in a laboratory watching from afar as Godzilla destroys buildings in the distance. Emmerich also stated that he wanted this version of Godzilla to be sleek and sexy. Which, like... no. Go take your fetishes elsewhere, bro. I don't want to see that crap. As the story goes, creature designer Patrick Tatopoulos presented some concept art and a 2-foot-tall statue to the executives at Toho during their meeting. Their aim was to pitch the Godzilla concept to then Toho chairman Isao Matsuoka, as well as Godzilla film producer Shogo Tomiyama and Godzilla special effects director Koichi Kawakita. Upon unveiling the artwork and the statue, the Toho team was just silent for several minutes. Tomiyama felt that the design presented was just so different and out there that it was impossible to make any minor adjustments. And ultimately, Toho approved the design. So what do I, a fat nerd from Wisconsin, have to say about this extremely controversial Godzilla design? It's not bad. From a strictly utilitarian storytelling standpoint, this take on Godzilla serves its purpose. I can't imagine putting any other iteration of the character in its place and having it not feel off. I really only have a few minor gripes. For starters, I don't like the hunched over posture. It's too dinosaur-like. I also wish that Godzilla had a true atomic breath. This was fixed in Godzilla the series, but it's sorely missed here. Finally, I wish that there were 3 rows of spines rather than the 2 on the left and the right with nothing in the middle. I think if there was another row in the middle with bigger spines, it would look a lot better. But beyond that, man, it's a cool monster design. It gets way too much hate. Like, come on, it's been a quarter of a century. Just let it go already. Sure, it's not the best Godzilla design, but it also isn't the worst. I would take this design over the 1967 Cookie Monster look and even the Singular Point design. I understand why people don't like it, and at the end of the day, this is just my opinion, but I think it's a bold and unique take on the character. Now, I'm sure a lot of Godzilla fans are well aware of the fact that this take on the character would later be turned into a new kaiju named Zilla, and this monster appeared in the 2004 film Godzilla Final Wars, where the Japanese Godzilla fights it and wins said fight in only a few seconds. Notably, in that movie, the filmmakers decided to make the CGI on Zilla look somewhat rough as a means of dunking on Godzilla 98. From my understanding, they just scanned a Trendmaster's toy and based a 3D model around that. However, I actually think that the Godzilla 1998's CG still holds up fairly well by today's standards. Sure, there are some god-awful shots here and there, but there are also some absolutely breathtaking frames that look better than some of the trailer shots from Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire. A lot of Godzilla fans like to label this movie as a CGI fest, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Godzilla franchise is so reliant on suitmation and practical effects. However, Godzilla 1998 features a ton of extremely impressive practical effects. The filmmakers had a practical Godzilla suit made, as well as a massive animatronic. Yeah, I ripped on the baby Godzillas for just being ripoffs of the Velociraptors from Jurassic Park, but they still look incredible. These are all practical suits with actors inside them, and let's not even forget the shots of the Chrysler Building and the Madison Square Garden exploding. Those were all done practically with miniatures, and they hold up really, really well. I understand this video is titled In Defense of Godzilla, and it's really hard to defend a movie that even the filmmakers have outright apologized for making. Screenwriter Dean Devlin said, quote, "The first mistake is that we did not commit to anthropomorphizing Godzilla, meaning we did not decide if he was a heroic character or a villainous character. We made the intellectual decision to have him be neither, and just simply an animal trying to survive. At the same time, we told the audience who these characters were. They had already made up their minds about them, and we could not change that perception. These were two serious mistakes in the writing of the film, and I take full responsibility." What's mostly infuriating for me as a hardcore Godzilla fan is that director Roland Emmerich even outright stated that he wasn't a Godzilla fan, saying, quote, "I was never a big Godzilla fan. They were just the weekend matinees you saw as a kid, like Hercules films and the really bad Italian westerns. You'd go with all your friends and just laugh." And in another interview, he said, "I didn't want to do Godzilla, but they made me a deal, which was unheard of. And I said, okay, let's go about this really radically. I'm not doing Big Belly Godzilla. I'm doing him as a lizard. That was supposed to tell everybody I can't do this movie. They said, oh, we'll call this the new Godzilla, the Hollywood Godzilla. Then we can still do our fat Godzilla." I said, shit. So knowing all of this information, what is my consensus? What is my ultimate defense of Godzilla 1998? Well, I think it's an underrated blockbuster monster movie. The vitriolic reaction that people had to this movie was partially justified, but is honestly getting old after 25 years of hearing about the same complaints. I think in due time, the Godzilla fandom will start experiencing what the Star Wars fandom experienced with the prequel trilogy. Much like the 1998 Godzilla film, people hated them when they first came out. They were labeled as CGI fests, even though they featured some very impressive miniatures. But the generation that grew up with those movies loved them, and the general consensus began to change once they had a voice. Granted, I don't think people will be clamoring for Toho to let Emmerich make his planned trilogy of Godzilla films and to restore the Emmerich-verse, but it's nice seeing some people have the courage to proudly admit that they like this movie in spite of all of its apparent flaws. I am one of those people. I think that this is a seriously flawed movie, but I can't help but love it. Well, at least I love the first 30 minutes, and then after that, it's kind of whatever. But still, to sum up my thoughts, it's a decent monster flick, but it's a bad Godzilla movie. Thank you all so much for watching. This is the first installment of what I plan to be a massive retrospective series on every single Godzilla movie. I know it seems weird to start with 1998, but that's because throughout the rest of this month, I'll be covering every single Godzilla movie made in America. Later on in October, I'll be doing a daily series of videos. Every day throughout the month of October, I'm going to be covering every single Godzilla movie. I know Cinemassacre already did this with Monster Madness back in the day, but to kind of separate that from this, my videos will be longer like this. So that means in October, you'll be getting daily videos just like this. I'm covering every single Godzilla movie. I'm covering as well the anime trilogy. So yeah, it's going to be insane. The reason why I'm waiting till October is because it's part of a, yearly series I do. Last year I covered like Harryhausen movies and stop motion stuff. And the year before that, it was more like just history of horror. So this year it's Godzilla. It's going to take a while to make all these. Like, I'm actually writing them all right now in March because they're going to take a long time to write. Some of these retrospectives on these movies might be like an hour long. Like, this is one of the biggest projects on this channel I think I've ever worked on. In November, once the retrospective series is done, I'm going to take every single retrospective, compile it all together in chronological order from the 54 film all the way up until like -1. Actually, no, by that point, it'll be the new Empire, the new Godzilla X Kong movie. But anyways, and I'll make it one big retrospective. And honestly, this video will very likely be several hours long. So, yeah, I will be glued to my editing chair, I guess, for the next couple months. So anyways, if you want to see that, subscribe. And if you want to help support me in doing this and making this content that I love making, consider becoming a member of the channel. It is greatly appreciated. You can check out all the benefits that comes with that. It's really awesome. And yeah, that about sums everything up. I'm Cole McCormick. You're watching Firewood Media, and I just wanted to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.